Today, it is known as the Brick Kingdom, a name given by students who visited this deserted, almost forgotten site. A name that evokes both the history and the magic of the place. But once, this place was known as Mill Hill and was alive with activity. They milled grain, sawed lumber, carded wool, and machined tools. They made water closet seats and tanks, bowling pins, bobbin machines, piano actions, ladies' underwear, plows, carriages, woolens, furniture, sugar arches, doors, sash and blinds, stoves, and wooden heels. They did it well and over many years in a spirit of pride and optimism. They did it all along the outlet of Crystal Lake in Barton, Vermont. The people of the village, native and newcomer, worked hard to make Barton what some called one of the sprightliest of New England's villages during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The transformation of Barton from agricultural village to industrial village was not unique. The same happened in many towns, where the right combination of cheap water power, inexpensive transportation by rail, and an eager workforce existed. In Barton, the growth was concentrated along the Crystal Lake Falls, where the water from the lake fell 90 feet within a short distance and had an estimated potential of 2,000 horsepower. A series of dams were constructed for the dozens of mills and factories, large and small, that would line the outlet over the decades, harnessing the white gold. The power of the Crystal Lake outlet began to be tapped in a different way when the rail line to Barton was completed in 1858. Suddenly, the finished products from Barton's mills were easily accessible to the urban markets of Boston, New York, and Montreal. With vast amounts of timber in the surrounding area, Barton was able to lure the first large-scale industry to Mill Hill, the Walter Hayward Company of Fitchburg, Massachusetts, manufacturer of chairs. For 3 decades, Hayward was the premier employer in Barton, presiding over an astounding population shift. Barton's population increased from just under 1,000 to 1,600 during the 1860s. The village was no longer made up of farmers and merchants, but also included a large class of laborers and mill workers dependent on Barton's industrial stability. When the Hayward Company pulled out of Barton in financial trouble, many men lost the jobs that they had held for years. After a couple of uncertain years for the village, the Peerless Manufacturing Company of Newport, New Hampshire, makers of ladies' underwear, stepped in to fill the void in Barton. To help lure the company to the site of the Hayward factory, Barton gave Peerless both the site and a generous tax exemption. What Barton got for its trouble was a factory employing 250 people. Peerless Manufacturing was different from Barton's other industries because it employed mostly women. In an age when employment for women was limited to teaching, clerking, or domestic help, the Peerless sought to convince the town that its factory jobs were safe, pleasant, and well paid. The company defended its employees' reputations and worked hard to create social and cultural activities like a library, an employee orchestra, picnics, corn roasts, and sugaring parties. The average workday was 9 or 10 hours long, spent in a room humming loudly with sewing, buttonholing, and finishing machines. Married and single women worked at the Peerless factory, many full-time, but others only intermittently. Teenage girls often worked at the factory during the summer. New houses, tenements, and group boarding houses, known as beehives, sprang up to accommodate the company's employees. Men worked in the cutting room, packing, shipping, and supervising. At its peak, the Peerless Company had 3 factories and sales offices across the country. In the decade before 1920, changes in fashion brought on difficulties for the company. The popularity of silk as the fabric for undergarments was more than the passing fad Peerless had hoped, and women began dressing differently. Gone were the layers of undergarments. Instead, women wore shorter dresses that conformed to their bodies. Peerless closed one factory, and then the Barton one. After a couple of different enterprises, the building that had housed Barton's largest industry burned in 1938. But for many, the most deeply felt loss had come earlier, when the Peerless left town. Other industries followed very different roads than the Peerless. The foundry and machine shop of John W. Merklin shows how one individual, with skills and adaptability, started small and achieved enormous success. Young John Merklin, born in 1840 of Scottish immigrants, was raised in the textile mills of Lowell, Massachusetts, where his father worked. When John came of age, he joined his father in his successful business of pattern making and machine work for the textile giants. But John was determined to leave Lowell, taking with him the mechanical skills he'd acquired there. In 1872, J.W. Merklin assumed the payments from a Lowell couple on a small piece of land on the Crystal Lake Outlet in Barton. 3 years later, Merklin built an impressive machine shop on the tumbling stream and began doing job work and manufacturing woodworking machinery. Learning from his new environment, Merklin soon became an expert on plows, sugar arches, and wood stoves. It seemed there was no machine he couldn't make or fix. His shop made saw benches, cider presses, granite polishing machines, drills, bobbin, and spool machinery. Decade after decade, his business boomed and made it possible for other industry and agriculture to succeed. Unlike Peerless and J.W. Merklin, many of Barton's industries were attracted, like the early chair factory, by the area's abundant supply of wood. Wessel, Nickel & Gross, manufacturers of piano actions, relocated their factory to Barton primarily to be close to their raw material, hardwood. In 1875, Otto Wessel and two colleagues working at Steinway & Sons, renowned piano maker, formed a partnership. Their idea to produce quality actions for numerous piano makers met with success. By the turn of the century, Wessel, Nickel & Gross were hailed throughout the industry, employed 500, and supplied the foremost piano makers. In 1919, the New York-based company let it be known they sought a desirable location in Vermont. Of 20 towns that responded with proposals, Barton won with a 10-year tax exemption and a water concession. Within months, the company began tapping local wood supplies, buying sawmills and large tracts of land, and controlling more. A year later, the factory complex had been completed, and 40 men were at work in the factory and mill yard. Besides the production of expertly crafted piano actions, the company also made shingles, clapboards, dowels, dimension stock, and sounding board stock. Barely 10 years after the company decided to move to Barton, it was experiencing layoffs. Eventually, the company's assets were sold for taxes. The rest of the country fared no better during the lean years of the Depression. Each industry has a different history. Each individual who worked there a different story to tell. We have only touched on a very few of those stories. We encourage you to learn more about Barton's past, ask questions, look around, and try to put the pieces together. For whenever we take the time to look back, we inevitably learn more about ourselves.